Hi, first graders. My name is Niels Jensen, and I'm here to speak to you on this Veterans Day because my grandson, Sam Jensen, is a first grader at Braeburn. And I'm also a veteran. First, I want to thank you for all the questions that you sent in to me beforehand. I'll do my best to try and answer them. But understand it's been a little while since I've done this, and I'm a little rusty, so please be patient with me. To begin with, I enlisted in the U.S. Navy back in 1965. Now, that was over 55 years ago, a long time. That means that I was in the Navy when your parents were not yet first graders. That was a long time ago. And I joined the Navy when I was only 18 years old. At that time, our country was involved in what became known as the Vietnam War, which was a war that was being fought on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, more than 9,000 miles away from where we live here in Connecticut. And it was a big war with over 500,000 U.S. Airmen, sailors, and soldiers that were actively involved in the war zone. Like many other young men at that time, I volunteered to serve my country. And I chose the Navy because as a young man, I had read many books about adventures at sea. I also grew up in the middle of the country, and as a result, I'd never even seen an ocean, so I was anxious to do so. Well, the first stop for anyone that joins the Navy is basic training. Everyone calls that boot camp. This is where they cut off all your hair, give you your Navy uniforms to wear, and teach you everything you need to know as a sailor. You have to learn how to swim, to fight fires, to shoot a rifle, to make a bed and fold your clothes the Navy way, to march, do push-ups, and run obstacle courses. But there are two things that they teach you right away. The first is you have to do everything they say right away. And the second thing is you have to go wherever they want you to go. There's no time for questions or arguing when you're in the U.S. Navy. After graduating boot camp, I was transferred to a naval air station in Pensacola, Florida, where I spent a year continuing my training and helping serve the Navy's pilot training program. It was where the Navy's famous Blue Angels were also stationed. And so I have many memories of watching the Blue Angels do their aerial routines high in the sky above where I worked every day. It was there that I worked with the first computer that I'd ever seen in my life. I was amazed at what computers could do at that time, and I wanted to learn everything that I could about them. I didn't know it at the time, but that experience with computers was to shape the rest of my life. From the career I would wind up choosing after I got out of the Navy to where I met the girl that I eventually married and raised a family with. And that interest in computers continues to this day. But after only a year in Florida, I received new orders to pack my bags and fly to Japan, where I was to join the crew of the USS Mars, which was to be my new home for the next 3 years of my life. Now, the USS Mars was a brand new ship that had been built for one purpose: to store and deliver everything that other ships needed to stay at sea. Everything from food and clothing to soap and toilet paper and all the parts that Navy ships and aircraft need to keep working. So my new home was like a giant floating Walmart or Target store. And other ships that were like the Mars delivered fuel ships needed to keep sailing and weapons that ships and aircraft needed to keep fighting. During the war, the Navy kept over 100 ships continuously at sea off the coast of Vietnam. So keeping them supplied was a big job. Every type of ship was there, from destroyers to cruisers, aircraft carriers, and even battleships. And the aircraft carriers were loaded with the latest fighters and bombers jets that the Navy had. Planes like Skyhawk, Phantom, and Intruders. Now my ship would meet up with these other ships at sea and transfer whatever supplies they needed using our 2 helicopters and sometimes strong cables that connected ships together that were able to sail along very close to each other. It was hard and many times dangerous work that had to be done even in the darkest nights, no matter what the weather was or how heavy the seas were at that time. Well, what was it like to live on a ship that spent most of its time out at sea? Well, first, it was very crowded. There were over 400 other sailors on board the Mars with me. Now, it was a big ship, but most of its space was used to store the supplies that we were delivering to other ships. So there really wasn't very much room left for the crew. There was no library, no family room, no gym, no game room, nowhere to go alone or have quiet time if you wanted it. The only space you had was where you worked and where you slept. And I had to share my bedroom with over 100 other sailors. Our beds were stacked 3 high, and everything that each of us owned, from our clothes to our personal items, had to be stored in the locker that we slept on. Second, it was boring at sea. Sure, there were exciting things to see and do while we were working, and we saw jet planes taking off and landing on aircraft carriers. We saw ships firing their guns or launching their missiles. But when the work was over, there really wasn't much else to do at sea. It's hard for you to imagine today, but back then there weren't any cell phones to call home with. There were no iPads to watch movies or play video games on. The ship didn't have television, and there was very little news from back home. Other than books and cards or board games, all we really had to entertain ourselves was each other. That meant that the friendships you made on board the ship were very important to all of us. Finally, at sea, it was very lonely. I mean, you had made great friends with the people you worked with, and I got to travel to strange and exciting places like Japan, the Philippines, and Hong Kong, places where I met people from other countries and cultures, people who spoke different languages than I did. I ate foods I'd never imagined I'd eat and visited places I'd never heard of or even dreamed that I'd get to see. But none of that was like my home, my family, and my friends that I had left behind when I joined the Navy. That was what I thought a lot about and missed more than anything. And so, after my 4 years in the Navy were over, I flew back home and put my Navy uniform away for the last time. I was proud that I'd served my country, but happy to begin living the rest of my life. I didn't see my uniform again until a few years ago when I shared another Veterans Day at Braeburn with my grandson Nick and his sister Ella. One last thing. A few years ago, I wondered what had happened to the ship that I'd spent 3 years of my life on. Turns out the Mars had had a long and useful career at the Navy. But in 2006, it was finally retired and sunk off the coast of Hawaii. Kids, I hope you found what I had to say interesting. I want to thank Sam's mother, Lindsay, for helping me make this video. And I especially want to thank you and the Braeburn School for celebrating Veterans Day. It makes all of us veterans feel like heroes. Thank you.